Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Security Squawk podcast. And guys, jumping right into it, we've officially crossed into a new phase of cyber risk. And it's not because AI suddenly became dangerous, but because it became useful to criminals and cyber criminals. And we got a couple stories today that highlight that. Google confirming that state-backed groups are operationally using Gemini across the intrusion lifecycle, using it for reconnaissance, using it for target profiling, phishing refinement, even generating malware components dynamically. And at the same time, two men in Connecticut allegedly scaled identity fraud using thousands of stolen identities to exploit onboarding systems at FanDuel. So different headlines, but same pattern, guys. The collapse of friction, the collapse of trust signals, and the rise of workflow as the real attack surface. So if you're leading a company and you still think cybersecurity is mostly about perimeter tools like firewalls and things like that, this episode is going to challenge that. So welcome to Security Squawk, where we, Randy, Andre, and I, translate cybersecurity chaos into business reality. And I'm Brian, and if this conversation sharpens how you think about risk, make sure you are subscribed to our channel over on YouTube, and wherever you're following us on social media, you can share the stream with someone in your circle and weigh in the comment section as we post questions and comments throughout the show. If you post something useful, we'll bring it up and we'll discuss it. Other than that, we're going to pull the three of us together for real world operator feedback into what's happening with these cybersecurity topics we've picked. So let's get into it, guys. Randy, we're going to bring you in. Andre, we ask you for your insight here as we talk about this AI basically becoming a productivity layer for attackers, right? We talk about a productivity layer in businesses and how it can become useful for businesses, but now it's becoming a massive productivity layer for attackers. And Google is basically saying we have evidence that they're using our tool to do so. As Google's threat intelligence group confirmed, multiple state-backed actors are using Gemini operationally. They're not experimenting, they're not dabbling, they're actually integrating it into their workflow. So Randy, why don't you walk us through what they're doing and what that means? Because I know this is like, the kind of stuff that you like to get into is like, the techniques and the as they call them.
It's not so much that as much as this is something we've been predicting for over a year, probably two, that this was going to happen. I like to call it either bad GPT or or chat GPT. But the reality here, they used Google Gemini and used Google Gemini they tricked it apparently. So they did it like it's a scenario, but they tricked it into basically working through the entire attack. So we're talking things like helping the attackers come up with phishing like lures, if you will, helping them to get ideas for reconnaissance. So what else can we find? So asking the Gemini, AI, what can we find here while we're, living off the land, if you will. They were using Gemini to refine their scripts, where basically they're like, either here's a script we wrote, or here's an idea, help us make it worse. Using Google Gemini to translate into like the local language and stuff like that. So, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even a couple years ago, we're looking for English that doesn't quite fit, that helps you, alerts you to a lot of bad emails. Maybe now we got to start looking for the M dash, a little long dash. There's not a way to make that on your keyboard that I know of, that only AI uses, or authors in actual real books. So they did that. And then they used AI, last little thought, they used the AI for persistence techniques. So that's more along the lines of like what you mentioned when you introduced me into the section, is more about living off the land as well. So, hey, AI, tell us, how can we stay inside of this infected customer or whatever for longer? So coming up with techniques to live below the radar, if you will. So that's kind of a generic kind of overview with it. And I've got some questions and some thoughts, but I'm sure you guys want to chime in on some stuff too.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it, bad grammar, cultural missteps. Those were the early warning indicators in phishing that businesses, had the advantage, I guess you could say. They could train on those things and tell people like, hey, look out for this stuff. But that advantage is quickly disappearing. Now you get multi-turn, psychologically tuned, fluent engagement at scale, right? And, the scary part is the modest increase in successful initial access changes the economics of intrusion campaigns, because that's really the model out there, right? The model is as a service, ransomware as a service, data theft as a service, whatever the specialty is of that group is, they're out there. They're ready to be hired. All you need to do is provide access, right? So now there's AI is going to create a whole ecosystem of cyber criminals that their specialty is not ransomware. Their specialty is breaking into your environment. Andre is going to talk about one way it was done today in his topic, and something that he's going to highlight. But like, if anybody takes any lesson away from this episode, it's in 2026, here in February of 2026, AI is going to make a whole entire ecosystem of cyber criminals out there possible. These are called your initial access brokers, your initial access people. And if that area of cyber criminal industry increases, we are in a lot of trouble. Because like I said, like, these ransomware groups have scaled to a point where they can bring on the business. They're not going to choke if more initial access brokers bring them more business. They're ready for it. They just need more initial access brokers. Well, Google's out there basically telling you they're using AI to do this, and and we can see it, and they're using our tools, and this is an issue. This is a problem.
That I think it's going to end up being a cat and mouse thing, because there are full-on AIs right now that you can download and run locally and can train yourself. So Google's checking them out and shutting them down. Won't they just start using their own AI? You know what I mean? Or something like that.
That's the thought process here, right? It's like the Google hasn't observed a fundamental shift in the threat landscape yet. And that's the shift I'm talking about. The shift I'm talking about is when that layer, that initial access broker layer of this cyber criminal, ecosystem that exists, right? If that expands, we're in a lot of trouble. And they can already see it expanding with their platform. And yeah, they're going to do the right thing and shut it down, because that's historically what they do, right? So you can kind of trust that if they pick up on something, they're going to do the right thing. But we know how this plays out, because we saw it with we saw it with cloud infrastructure, right? There's the Azures, there's the AWSs of the world. Look, when they get a bad actor in their environment, they shut them down. But there's also these fly-by-night hosting providers. And if you don't think that these fly-by-night AI companies like ChatGPT and Gemini aren't going to come, they're coming. They're already out there. As Randy calls them ChatGTP. That's just his terminology for some garbage GPT that somebody put up and built, right? So at the end of the day, this is going to become prevalent and an issue that companies are going to have to deal with. That organizations are going to be dealing with a layer of cyber criminals that are using these tools and beating them at their own game using AI. Andre, let's bring you in. Thoughts on the statements here?
So I'm going to look at it at a different angle, because if Google is kind of already saying like they're seeing this rise, they're even probably having trouble controlling it themselves. Just going back to the fly-by-night companies, let's just say a company decided, hey, I'm going to hire someone to create my own internal AI. And now, because at the end of the day, it's all about prompting, right? So, if you asked AI a certain question that's so obvious, it's built to say, no, I'm not going to provide that. It's not ethical or whatever like that. But if you can prompt something correct in a easier way, and now you're using an internal AI system that now can possibly give out information that your employer did not want you to know, such as payroll information, client information, or any of that sensitive information that they just may not want that particular employee to see. So I also see this as another situation where you're going to have internal AI things develop, and accidentally or maybe not accidentally, employees are going to be prompting the AI, and it's going to look at the whole internal database and start giving out things that it probably shouldn't have been given because there was no correct guardrails put in place from the beginning.
Okay, so there's a lot here to unpack, right? For me, right? Number one, it just shows you how evolutionary technology, cybersecurity, and now AI will be. So get buckle up, because it's going to be a ride. There's a couple interesting things that I pulled out of both research articles that I was looking at when I was preparing for the show. One of those things, guys, is this whole thing where you basically have these what they're calling click fix campaigns, where they're hosting malicious instructions inside AI share links. So a user clicks what appears to be a legitimate Gemini transcript page, and the instructions look helpful. They paste the command in the terminal, and then it's an exploit. And so they're weaponizing AI answers, hoping that you'll use that code on your system. And that's one way that they're breaking in the systems.
Wow.
The other thing that Google observed is campaigns exceeding 100,000 prompts targeting model extraction attempts. What I'm talking about here is if you have APIs running, and the APIs in the last 5 years have become basically the standard. It's how SaaS applications essentially integrate and talk to one another, right? They are basically using AI to reverse engineer, diagnose, look for whatever they can to make your API become an attack surface for behavioral theft. Not to breach you, just to figure out how they can trick your employees or get your systems to do or operate in a way that they were not designed to behave. That is what's going on here. So I'm just giving it to you deep because this is stuff we haven't seen before. This is a level of cyber criminality that it's OSINT on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the best way I can lay it out for you if you know what that is, right? It's operational research on your target on steroids using AI, and they're figuring out like your technology. What are you using for tech, and how does that work together? And can we exploit that in any way? Is there any weak link in that chain? A human, a piece of software, a 0-day, bad code, something that we can exploit along the way here. And they're using AI to figure that out.
Yeah, and I think that's, with AI, it's making all of, even in the green room, we were thinking about like, man, how were we doing our show notes and things like that 3 years ago and stuff like that. So it makes makes it a little easier, but also a little lazier. And then of course, people always say, well, if AI is given to me, it must be real. And especially if you don't even understand the back end of it, as far as if you're talking about code and stuff like that, you're basically just literally just letting the bad guys in, and they're going to do what they got to do.
Yeah.
And, everyday tools will not catch this, right? Your everyday security tools aren't catching this stuff.
We've been talking about it for a while, and you hear AI can elevate your business. And when you were talking about that, Brian, I was thinking about how right now I could tell AI to act as a world-class social media expert or marketing expert or whatever, and can come up with some kind of plan that 5 years ago would have taken, a $100,000 a year employee or something like that. It's the same thing on the flip side for the bad guys using AI. What used to take a larger organization, what used to take more manpower, now with AI and, custom prompts and blah, 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 they can do basically the same thing, but on the bad guy side of the fence. Does that make sense? It lowers the bar to entry. It raises the quality of what they can do, which means it's just going to be more that we have to deal with. Although, as I was researching this for the show, I saw a suggestion of how we got to put AI in there to stop AI. That's the only thing we can do. And anyway, that kind of reminded me of Terminator 3. I think that's what they did in Terminator 3. So anyway, but that's going to be a thing that they're going to have to do. They're going to have more AI powered security operations centers that are ingesting the data just like actual humans were doing 5 years ago, right? Or 6 years ago.
So here's the other thing I want to leave people with. I know this is probably going to be like sound unpopular or be unpopular because it is unpopular, but this is where people are going to really have to start looking at like things that we have been able to do in IT for a very long time, but I see very, very few companies doing it. And that's things like allow lists around websites and SaaS applications, because that's the only way you're going to combat these rogue like AI things that are popping up. It's, like I mentioned, like these rogue servers that we saw cyber criminals popping up to do various things with different servers, create their own VPNs, like create their own infrastructure that's used for nefarious purposes, right? And that allowed cyber criminals for a long time to advance what they were doing. And it's only going to happen again with AI. Like somebody out there is willing to spin up some infrastructure because they invested all this money into hardware and power generation, and they're going to turn a blind eye to what they're doing inside of that data center. And that is going to be legit, right, Randy? You disagree? So you're going to need to be able to block those things and have a policy to block those things, from your infrastructure, from being able to see those things. And it's going to basically be like, we can't trust anything anymore until we know it's legit. And then, okay, yes, we trust Google Gemini. We trust ChatGPT. We allow those, but we don't allow anything else.
Yeah, kind of like how what TikTok was a couple of years ago when they were literally, then data was flowing out into China and stuff and things like that.
Yep, 100%.
And that's interesting. You said that, Brian, because you didn't use the word, or or the words zero trust. That's literally what zero trust is, right? And that's something that we've been pushing on this show from day one, is to adopt a zero trust stance in your IT. Adopt that to help keep what you have secure and out of the hands of the bad guys. And it's more relevant today than it's ever been.
Yeah. Before we move on to Andre's topic, a couple questions in the comment section there. If you're watching us on social media or YouTube, you can feel free to chime in. Want to give a shout out to some of our YouTube watchers who've chimed in: Luke, Tony Alexander, and Gamer Paps. What's up, guys? Glad you could join us this morning. And then share the show. If you're watching us, share it on the platforms. Push us out, talk us up in the chat. Let other people know this is a worthwhile podcast, and what we talk about on this show isn't just fluff, and we get into it. Probably talk about things that most other people aren't talking about or even thinking about when it comes to technology and especially AI and how to use it securely. So, Andre, let's move on to you, sir. Let's shift to the FanDuel case, as they say. Talking it up, we have two individuals charged with using thousands of stolen identities to create fraudulent accounts and exploit promotions. What stands out to you here? Why'd you bring it to the show?
Yeah, so I'll give a little history of what happened here. But before I do that, the reason I brought it to the show is because I think it's important for us to know what happens to our sensitive PII information. So when we get the letters in the mail, or we're talking on our show, talking about, they're offering, free credit report monitoring, or we may say, oh, this breach of this company, and there's, 10,000 names and email addresses and phone numbers and all of that. And a lot of times we'll get the, sheet of paper in the mail saying, hey, we got, your data may have been compromised and just watch out. But I wanted to kind of use this as a real case example of what happens to your data or your information after this breach. So in this case, we have these two, guys who thought they had a really good business model where they would never get caught, right? So these two criminals were basically, they went on the dark web and they purchased people's names, email address, phone number, all of that information that we know our information is out there. And then what they decided to do is they used FanDuel, which is like a online betting, and they use your information, right? So when you're creating these accounts, you have to, because it's gambling and there's taxes that may or may not have to be paid and so forth like that. So they need all of your information. And they went into the FanDuel site, they put in your information and they created new accounts. And this is not just like, a handful. They did about 3,000 of this. So this is a very long manual process that they have to do. And so whenever you're creating these accounts, if you've ever seen it where it may say, please tell us what address is common to you. And what they would do is they had an online subscription that, all of these websites where you can just type in someone's name and it's going to tell you, more information, kind of like a background check website. And so Been Verified is one of them, for example. So they had subscription to these websites where they basically use the data that they purchased from the dark web, and they use legit online sites to get as much information as they can so that they can then create accounts. Then from there, a lot of times with these accounts, they have specials on the FanDuels where they say, hey, for every account that's new, you can maybe get $100 in playing money or, whatever the case is. And they essentially use that money to do online betting. Then they even put in some of their money. And then from there, when it was time to get paid, well, in 5 years, they made about $3 million. So not bad as far as the business model. The only problem was it was illegal. So I kind of just wanted to kind of just spearhead this as far as like, this is what happens to your identity when it's stolen. These are what people are doing. The only difference is we're seeing this in the US and that's why they got caught, where many times this is overseas and they don't get caught.
Man, there's a ton to unpack here, Andre. I'm glad you picked this article because what this is really, I mean, it's about a lot of things, but one of the big things here that stands out to me is the use of identities to get the bonuses and the sign up things and the referral credits and all of that, and just build this like almost circular, whatever, and then funneling the money out. And really at the heart of that is an identity. And people, we're all vulnerable because we've all been in dozens of hacks or breaches, where our information's gotten leaked onto the dark web, if you will. And now they're going in this case, they went in, they put all that together, and then they opened accounts to get the bonuses, the referral credits, and, free $100 this and that and all that, and then cycle that money out of there. And at the very bottom of it is the identity of people. And identity to bad guys is like cold hard cash. And these guys, just because they got caught, kind of show us one of the ways that happens. But if you can use an identity, you can use it as a bad guy to generate money for your organization. To me, that's the most disturbing thing that kind of, is glaring here, because how many hacks have we talked about that have like conduit affected over half of all the people in Texas, right? Or conduit, whatever it was called, affected over half of the people in Texas. Like, that's insane. And that means that information can be used to put together a fake identity to do something like this. So a lot of stuff here, man.
Yeah, when you connect all this back to the AI story, the common thread is pretty clear. So it doesn't really matter if it's state-backed reconnaissance or domestic fraud schemes. The vulnerability isn't just technical infrastructure and tools. It's your business. It's your workflow integrity. It's things like recruiting, making sure you're not hiring bad guys, right? Onboarding, making sure that, you're doing it in a way that's secure, but also not predictable, right? Verification calls, same thing there. Support channels, like, don't make your support channels a pathway for these initial access brokers that I talked about, because they're coming after your marketing people, your sales people, right? Your customer service people, the low level people that maybe aren't getting the same training that maybe executives are, or things like that, right? That they know that you think like, well, they're customer service. Their systems don't really have access to a whole lot, right? But a lot of cases, you just need to get access to that one system, and then you can figure out ways to get to the other systems, right? And that's the name of the game. So, as Randy said, if trust is assumed rather than continuously validated, it becomes exploitable, and that's what zero trust fights against, right? So I don't know. You guys have any more thoughts on this before we kind of wrap up the show here?
No, just in this case, it wasn't hackers necessarily. This was just organized fraud. And then also, I mean, obviously, it's something, it eventually got alerted to FanDuel, but 5 years later, right? So for 5 years, they were able to do this. So one would think that if a person with the same IP address is logging in to create accounts, 200 times, maybe that is a little fraud, So I don't know what systems that I mean, yes, you could use VPN and things like that. We don't know, but that just also is a something that companies also need to look at as well. So if you're giving any type of incentive, there could be ways that fraudsters are going to look at it, and you also have a responsibility to make sure that someone isn't frauding your system, and the Americans are now paying for it.
Yeah. So if you're a CEO listening to this, here's the reality. You're not facing smarter criminals, right? You're facing faster criminals with higher quality scripts and fewer operational constraints, right? Recruiting is now an attack surface. AI product interfaces are exposure points, right? These chat bots, these chat tools that you have now, and connecting all these tools and internal things to them, your internal data, your Outlook, your Gmail, right? If all I got to do is get access to your prompt, your Copilot prompt to find out what's in your email, that's at a massive exposure point.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can get to these things through onboarding workflows that, are not well put together, and they become fraud engines that, essentially are weak points. And so these are things that you need to work on and harden them. Like, figure out ways, bring in, pen testing teams that can pen test your onboarding process to determine whether you have an issue or not. Right. And if you don't have these things, if you're like, well, we don't even have an onboarding process, you're so far behind the eight ball, it's not even funny. Right. I mean, like, at this point, everybody should have processes for pretty much everything, including AI usage. Right. AI usage. If you don't have AI usage policy in your business right now in 2026, you better get it in the next quarter or two, because you're already behind.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, like, if you're an IT director, right, you need to reassess your assumptions around trusted domains and shared links, like I talked about. You need visibility into fileless execution patterns, because that's kind of like the flavor of the month now, right? They are no longer using malware to attack you. So you got to figure out how they're using AI and things like that, and API to, basically break into your systems and break through to your people. And if your company operates AI services, understanding, if you have tools connected to them, if you have certain things, that these are all risk points that if cyber criminals can get a hold of your tools, they can prompt and get information about how those APIs work and how certain things are working together between your tools and your AI internally. So you got to be smart about it. And for our MSP friends out there, this just means for us that breaches will increase and originate from different places now, including these workflow exploitations, as Andres pointed out, right? Not firewall misconfigurations, not patching, or something getting through because it wasn't patched or something like that, right? So I guess, guys, what this episode reinforces is that AI didn't invent new attack types; it simply removed the friction from existing ones. And when that friction disappears, scale can only increase, right? Yep. So the real danger isn't novelty, it's compounding efficiency. And that's what a lot of people thought. A lot of people thought, oh, they're going to be able to create all these novel threats and things like that are going to circumvent EDR. Yes, that's true, but that's not the low-hanging fruit, right? That's like saying go build a CRM with Claude, right? It's not going to happen, right? But you can use AI to make your current operations way more efficient. And they're working on that, and they're compounding that efficiency every single day. So I expect here in this quarter and next quarter in 2026, we're going to see a surge in the abuse of AI, trusted SaaS APIs, and sharing links, and instruction-based staging over the next 6 to 9 months. Precisely because it bypasses traditional filtering logic and what everybody's looking for today.
Yeah, that's a nutshell.
Randy, anything? Nothing there, Randy? Nothing you want to add? Come on.
Well, no, I've said all I was going to say about this. So it's a good way to round it up in a nutshell.
All right, so I guess the way we can put it, if this episode sharpened how you think about risk and AI, we ask you to share it with someone who owns a process or owns a business around IT. Drop your perspective anytime in the comments, even if we're not live and you're picking this up as a recording or as a podcast in your favorite audio podcasting platform. always drops those comments in the social media. It helps other people find this content and make it worthwhile. So if you value the depth we bring here, the research, the analysis, and the production, you can support the show over at buymeacoffee.com/security squawk. I think I got a little link down there if I get the image off the screen here, guys. There it is. And that support helps keep this show independent and focused on real operator insight and not bore you with ads or promotions from people who just want to peddle their products to you. So see you guys on the next episode, where we're going to probably examine more things, cybersecurity, AI, and all that stuff. So hope to see you there, same time, same place next week. This is the Security Squawk podcast. I'm Brian, signing off for Randy and
Bye,
Andre.
everybody.
Stay safe, stay sharp. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.